Hello and welcome to the Gavin Davis Limited YouTube channel. I've been thinking about startups lately, and I know I started my last video by saying the exact same thing, but I'm still thinking about them. So I've covered recently workflow and process and tooling for startups, and I've also talked about source control particularly. But I'm aiming these at kind of creative startups or other non-technical startups, people who have, they've not necessarily got technical people on the ground on day one. So this is who these are primarily aimed at. Now, this video is about communication, which I've called digital collaboration, but really it's communication. This video is in a similar space to the last ones I've made, but it's very particular because communication didn't come naturally to me, right? I'm a software person and I've got all the attendant debuffs that software people have in terms of being able to relate to people and social function and things like that. And I've had to work incredibly hard on clarity of communication and even read books and things like that. Even now I still screw up. Even now my communication isn't as perfectly crystal clear as it could be. So take this as general advice from someone 3 decades deep into the software industry rather than the most elite communicator of all time giving you a TED talk. The first thing to describe is internal versus external communications. So we're thinking about startups, primarily like stealth phase or very early phase startups. So you've not necessarily surfaced the water yet. You're still working on what you are. You're still putting your product together. You may not even have investment yet. So generally that early phase and getting it right there, hitting the ground running as you start to gently scale up and add people. So internal communication, that's your organization talking within itself. And then external is talking to your users or potential users or your investors or partners or whoever is outside the walls, whoever hasn't signed your NDA, those kind of things. So the first part of this is about those internal communications. So a couple of weeks ago, I did a video about source control for creative startups. And what I'm walking through here is very similar, but about the communications. So if you saw the SCM video, and it doesn't matter whether you did or not, SCM source control management, you may remember this hypothetical character, Richard, who's got a startup and he needs to scale up beyond himself to get work done. So he hires Rita and they start working together. They're not in the same city, but they're working on the same project and they're using various communication channels being telephone, text and WhatsApp and email. And that's working okay. They're both creatives. They're both happy to use telephones. Technical people like me are not. We really don't like telephones. I would rather fight AJ than make a phone call. And that's real because I can actually box. I can't make phone calls. Give me a video chat. I'm happy. All right. But if I can't see you, as a technical person who's a bit, on the spectrum, I don't want to talk to you. Okay, I'm just being real with you. That's what we're like. I'm not the only one who's like that. Although, some people are more high functioning, some people are less high functioning. Just be aware of that. But Kenneth, an old friend of Richard's, he's based in Latin America. He gets brought in to work on the project and he's in a different time zone. So you've now got a lot of other issues with communication and he's communicating primarily over email because he doesn't want to call people at 3 a.m. They don't want to call him at 3 a.m. So we have problems with communication potentially, which is loss of information. Let's say Richard said something to, I've forgotten her name, I'm going to call her Amy now, to Amy and hasn't said it to Kenneth, but he thinks he has because it's gone in an email, or maybe an email snowball is happening, and I'll talk about that in a minute, and things are just flying past people on the screen. It's all getting a bit out of hand. I've alluded to this already. People have different communication styles. Some people communicate just outright better than others as well, but there's also some people prefer to write offline and think carefully about it. Some people are very shoot from the hip. There's siloization, which is when someone gets all the knowledge in their head and they don't share it. It's, when there's no channel for them to share it. If they've just told one person that information hasn't gone out to the team, they can't search it, they can't find it. And complexity increases in an organization exponentially. What do I mean by that? Well, we got 3 people communicating kind of one-to-one or maybe sending a mass email every once in a while. Here it is when you've got 30 people. That's 435 potential unique one-to-one conversations. That is up to 435 messages per day if they're even sending one each. That's 14 and a half hours reading per day if you wanted to read everything that everyone's sending to everyone. Now, this doesn't scale, right? This is impossible to find information. This is very easy to trip over yourself and duplicate work. And if you saw the last video on the channel about startup process, we call that waste. and things fall through the cracks. That's another category of waste. New people are hard to onboard and that's waste as well. And team knowledge is fragmented. These are all what I would call waste. So if your communications aren't right, your organization isn't right. So let's look at asynchronous and synchronous communication. We have to be clear that even within our organization, we have two kinds of communication. The synchronous communication, which is two people or more speaking on a meet or a call, a live chat, a huddle, whatever you want to call it. And then asynchronous, which is different people communicate at different times. This is like your task board, your ticket management software, your comments, your messages, updates people can read whenever they're free, and email would fall into this category here. And what we want to avoid with our asynchronous communication is the email snowball, which I got my intern to generate this diagram. And, you got to think before you reply, all right, because this can get real silly real fast. You can get these things sliding past you, and you get included in one of these email snowballs, and then you're in it for life. And it's just like, oh no, what do I do? And then your email inbox is getting less and less valuable because you've got all this stuff that barely any of it pertains to you sliding past you, and it's hard to find anything in. I mean, Google Mail is okay for search. I use Proton Mail. It's not brilliant for search. It's security first, so we just get that trade-off. So let's tool up now. I've got Slack in the middle here. It doesn't have to be Slack, but what we would add is some kind of team chat. And that sounds like a trivial thing, chat. It's really not. This is the most critical piece of tooling to have in your organization if you are a distributed startup. If you're not all in the same room, in the same time zone, operating on the same schedule without, I don't know, Steve having to pick his kids up at 3 and Jane having her Pilates class at 10 and, all these things that we're now used to working distributed and working remote, if you're not all working the same schedule in the same room, you've got to have this kind of software. And even if you are, you still probably need it. I'm going to just assume we're using Slack. There's plenty of others like MS Teams or Discord or whatever, but Slack is the one I've had the best experience with. So in your small startup, a lot of your announcements are getting made. You're discussing things with the engineering. You're discussing the design of the product in semi-real time. But if I go offline for a few hours, I don't have to constantly look at it on my phone. I can come back to it. This is not real-time, purely real-time communication primarily. It can be. You can do real-time comms in Slack, but also you're building up a knowledge base. If you're having the same communications, you can search, I had a conversation with Ahmed about this last week and he said this, and I can look at what we said and I've got that value there. And you can connect it to external systems. I've only shown 2 here. Your issue tracker, which might be Asana or Jira or Pivotal Tracker, whatever it is. And you can see issues being created and dealt with. You have a visibility in a single pane of glass. I've also connected telemetry into Slack so you know how your product is faring. You can connect sales data if you've got a CRM, a customer relations machine. What's it called? Customer relationship management software. Not machine. Like Salesforce or something. I'll talk a bit more about CRM later, but you can see that popping up in your Slack if you want to. You only have to be in the channels that pertain to you. So if you're an engineer, you might just be in announcements and engineering. So communications are segmented by what they're about. You can search them, you can turn them off. You're not spamming your email service to death. It really is a huge upgrade over email. And I know a lot of people are used to working in chat these days. Slack also allows voice chat, and I'll talk a bit about that as well. So let's talk a bit about picking the right channel. So you've got this software now. Okay, I need something done. Well, it's not a job for Slack necessarily. You would probably raise a ticket on your issue tracker, and I talked about that in my last video about why we'd use an issue tracker. Ticket management software, story manager, whatever you're going to call it. They have multiple names in software engineering, but you need something done. You write it down clearly, use it, and you refine it with your CTO or a senior engineer or whoever you've got that you can work with to make sure it's executable. If it's general news, you can post on the team's announcements channel. If it's performance management, you would get in touch with that team member and set up a meeting. I'll talk a bit about how to do that shortly. That's very important, how you do that. If it's a regular all-hands meeting, you'll have a call. This might be through Slack has huddles or Google Meet has Hangouts, which we're now just called Meets. Any video conferencing you like, WhatsApp, doesn't really matter. But I'll talk about how to run those calls shortly. And if you need complex tech help, you usually need something called pairing, where you're both on a screen share which again, Slack supports, Google Meet supports, and you can see what the person's doing. You can troubleshoot remotely, and some of them even allow you to drive. I think Teams allows you to drive keystrokes and mouse movements on the user's machine. There's some software like VNC allows you to do that, remote desktop, all these kind of things. So there is tooling you might need if someone's got a complex technical thing to do in real time. So obviously you're not just spamming everything into an email. You're not calling people out of the blue. Because if you're going to call me, you better message me first to let me psych myself up. Like I'm serious about this. I am not someone to be called out of the blue, because I will panic, and I'll talk about why shortly. So general advice for digital comms. This is where all the "I will talk about this in a minute" comes out. Don't be spooky. So this is a quote from Adam Keyes, but I've seen this from a lot of people. When you're communicating with your team, lead with context and reassurance. Never message someone on your team, "Let's talk when you get a minute." That's a void of information, scary as heck. I'm going to assume not only are you firing me, you're probably going to accuse me of murder, and you're coming for me. And, you know, my mind will paint the worst possible picture if, "Hey, can we have a chat?" Please, please, please never say that to me. You have no idea what that does to some people. And to a degree, I think everyone reacts like that, but people like myself react really badly to that. So do be really careful with communication. Provide the context, and I would call that over communicating, which is intentionally share more context, updates, and decisions than you think people strictly need. So it's like, I am saying this in the context of this and this project. We need to have a conversation about the work on the graphics engine over here, or the player interaction, whatever it is. So you're not confused. You don't know what something's about, and just tread carefully, because there's no tone of voice. You can't see anyone through text. So yeah, tread carefully and over communicate, provide context, and allow people to offline. Right. I've touched on this, but keep the communications to the correct channels. You don't need to WhatsApp someone to say, "Hey, I've slacked you." No. If you're doing that, there is a major problem in your organization, right? You should never be backing, unless like there are servers on fire and there's only one person who knows how to get it. And that's a smell as well. That's what we would call an organizational smell. But you shouldn't be multi-channeling communications. You know, it's probably not the emergency you think it is. And let people pick their own schedules. If you're going to work offline, I mean, not in the same room, if you're going to work remote, lean into it. And if you're not trusting people to pick their schedules and the way they work, you know, beyond the points of integration you have, it's like, we write tickets this way, we do it this way. Where you haven't specified how we do it, let people do it how they see fit. You have to default to trust. You have to, otherwise, why are you working with these people? If you don't trust them, why are you working with them? And meetings and agendas. Meetings need agendas and outcomes. So synchronous communication, when you've pulled people in, right, they're not actively producing anything at that time. So don't waste anyone's time. Don't have anyone in the meeting you don't need there. Have a clear agenda, and then have action items, outcomes for people. You probably want to put this in your ticketing software, and you make sure that the meeting is focused and you stay on agenda. If you're working with people that tend to go off on bunny trails, someone has to be there to gently but firmly say, "Hey, can we stay on topic here, please? No, this meeting is about this. If you want to take that offline," that's the phrase we use, "and discuss that with the relevant parties, please set up another call. We are talking about this thing." Because if you don't do that, there are some people who can completely derail a meeting. So in software engineering, the role of the person who is basically there with the shepherd's crook, yanking people back over target, is often called a scrum master or a delivery lead, depending on the context. So that person is there to facilitate the meeting, not necessarily to contribute directly, but to keep people on track. And that is a real skill. Okay. That is not something that's easy. There's something on my channel about, how I didn't really know what a delivery lead was. And I worked with one for one, and then he had a few days off, and it's like, oh, wow. Oh, right, it really isn't as smooth without him, is it? And you come to realize how valuable people are who keep the meetings on track. So you can use AI to take notes these days, but don't lean on that too hard. Don't disengage, right? But you can say, "Hey, AI, generate me these action items." So that can be acceptable as long as it's not too much of a crutch for you. But yeah, think about your meetings beforehand, have outcomes after, don't prat about. Part 3, external communications. I'm only really going to touch on this a bit. I'm primarily about internal comms here, but I'm just re-showing this diagram, but the external communication is very different. So internal, you are defining particular channels and you say these kind of messages are going to go here and we're going to have meetings about these kind of things. And then we have a regular meeting here, we have a stand-up, we have a demo, whatever it is. And we write tickets in this way. So you've got your defined stuff. When you're working with people outside, you've got to be generous in what you accept. So you're strict in how you operate yourself. Then you have flexibility areas where people can do as they see fit, beyond those guidelines, beyond we write tickets this way, we work that way, beyond what you have stated explicitly of how we work, ways of working, you let people do what they want. Externally, you've got to be really generous in what you accept. So some customers might be phone people. So hopefully you've got people who are phone people who can do phones. Some people might be email people. Some people might want to talk to a chatbot before they talk to you. So you want the business, right? And you want to impress them, especially with investors. That you got to keep them sweet. So you can't dictate necessarily to your customers how you're going to operate unless you've got leverage to do so. That said, a CRM software like Salesforce, other CRMs are available. Not my area of expertise. I've worked with them a little bit. That helps you keep track of what our pitch is. Where are we with client X? How is this bid going? How is this pitch going? So just trying to keep that in your head is pretty difficult. You can sort of build your own on a Kanban board or whatever, but yeah, do look into CRM if you're not using one already, and make sure you're not exposing people to stuff that's external they don't need to know right now necessarily. I mean, don't make anything secret, but if there's unless it needs to be. So default, you bias towards transparency is what I'm saying. But don't have people having to know everything all the time, because that doesn't scale either, but have it so they can look up that information. That's why having it as a ticket, having it on a CRM, having it on a knowledge base, having it written down somewhere, or at least having it searchable in Slack, that means that you can find that information if you need to know it. And if you don't have to fill your brain like Homer Simpson, then you forget maths. That, as I get older, that's starting to feel like a realer and realer thing. So there we go. That is, thank you very much for watching. Like, these videos aren't necessarily about my areas of expertise, but areas of research and growth. And in this instance, I really can't cover everything. I'm just trying to give, let's say you're a creative startup, you don't have necessarily many tech people on board. You want to get your communication sorted. You don't want to be wasting and bleeding all over the floor. You want to have the communications be efficient. So this is just 101. Like, I'm not drilling into anything loads here. But, if I can be useful, do feel free to reach out, and feel free to browse around the rest of my channel. Thank you.